The O'Malley's would have started building boats in Corona around the mid-1800s. And my grandfather would have started that time. And so it's carried on since then. His son John took it over. Then I took it over. And my son John's taken over a little bit at the moment.
It fell to me, of course, as a member of a family of 9, and there was 9 of us in the family. It fell to me to take on the ferry services that my dad took on from his father. That's going back over 150 years ago now.
I think what's beautiful about this project, or what's so great about this project for me, is that it turns our disadvantage into our advantage.
I think that the fact that he's brave enough or mad enough, whatever it is, to have a go at this, I think he needs to be commended for that, especially, and I genuinely hope it works out.
The bearer of barrels of whiskey was something out of the clouds as far as I was concerned. You know, in the fairest, it was the last thing that I ever thought of. And then, of course, Carl, the head that he's on him, he's constantly thinking of something weird every other day.
I thought the man was crazy, I'm not going to lie. I didn't think that he would actually go ahead and do it.
Carl then came, he said, no, we just put whiskey into it, and we thought he'd lost his mind. We thought it was crazy.
I thought whiskey on Clarendon was a wonderful idea, but doing it on the sea, I thought that's unusual, but but I thought it was a lovely idea at the same time,
Well, I'm always looking forward to tasting a nip of whiskey.
How it all started was that my grandfather was a weaver by trade, but the weaving didn't agree with his health, and he decided to do something else. So he ordered a boat from one of those journeyman boat builders that would go from village to village and build boats for anybody that wanted them. So he got an order in for a boat with this man, and the job was nearly finished. He had been taking templates of the boat as the journeyman boat builder was finishing off, so he wasn't too happy with that. So he had been paid for the building of the boat, so he decided to break up all the models that my grandfather had made. So my grandfather put them all back together again, so that's how it started. But I don't think it's going to continue very long, because there's no demand for wooden boats now. It's all fiberglass and steel, so it's not going to survive for too long more.
I could go
along the bottom edge
on the Hagen piece.
Go in between the old ones there again, and
yeah. I might just put a couple, see where that, just below where the oakum is hanging, before I caulk that lower seam anymore. Yeah. To let her right down, or just get her to this heavy one?
I might have to shave the head of that nail.
I just was with Sandra.
I won't go anymore anyway. That's an old nail, yeah.
The butt after that there now, that'll have to be nailed as well.
Pardon?
Just after that.
Yeah, well.
Or screws.
Oh, it's screwed, yeah.
Yeah.
Back in the early days, they'd be made from oak framing and deal planking, but they were all tar then, and the tar that was going that time was a good preservative, and they lasted for years and years. Yeah. In the later years, then there was oak framing, of course, and larch planking, which was about the best timber you could get for planking. The Dolphin was the biggest boat we had made up till then. She's about 36 feet, and she was built in the around 1968. Myself and my brother, 2 brothers actually, but myself and Thomas mostly put her together. It took about 5 months to finish her off. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to sand that down and put another screw there. That nail won't go anymore. Hit a bolt or something inside there. Like a nice dry day now, sure, it could be. You have a good lot of primer. Lash it on.
Yeah, I'll do. I have the paint now, so.
Yeah, we'll do over this caulking and it'll be ready then for the seal over. Yeah. Yeah, in the early days in my father's time, they would have no mechanical tools at all, no electric tools, with a handsaw. And they had the pit saw, which was used quite a bit that time for cutting planking, where it was used on the pitch with one person standing over on top and another one on the bottom. And up and down, cut along they'd have a line along the tree and just keep to the line. Other than that, there was very little tools, yads, handsaw, spoke-shaped planes, of course, but you'd have to offer the nail into the oak. You'd bore the planking and you'd drive the rest of the nail in the oak, but you'd have to split the grain with the nail so that you wouldn't crack the timber. From the Dolphin on, we got a bandsaw and a small 12x7 planer thicknesser, so it made life much easier for us then.
Yeah, I would have started from scratch. Even as a young fella, you were always given a job to do, whether it was just doing a bit of tidying up around the shed. I suppose when I started helping out, weekends and whatever off school, they would have been busy enough that time. There was probably there was always a few new boats getting built then. Say in the 80s and that, they were still kept going. There was always a few little jobs to do here and there. Gradually over time, just picking up the trade, learning bits and pieces here and there, kind of improving on the knowledge and the skill set as time went by. But I suppose then, as I got older, it was already clear then to see that there was no real demand there for the craft anymore. There was there just wasn't the demand there. People weren't looking for the traditional wooden boats anymore. So I suppose even though I got a chance, lucky enough I got a chance to work on some boats over the years, from new, from start to finish, getting a few of these type of boats built, and then some of the smaller traditional boats as well that we always built. Just eventually realised that the demand wasn't there. There wouldn't be a longer term future in it, so I had to look elsewhere. So I took on another trade, and I'm working at that full time. But I suppose in the background there's always that drawback to doing this work. When the opportunity comes along, it's not that often you get to work on a boat that was built by your father and launched before you were ever born yourself. So it's nice to be able to do that work when it comes up, So.
Well, he did mention to me that he was going out to collect it, all right, but I honestly didn't believe it until I saw it coming around the harbour, coming around Canacurra, as I mentioned, and see it thrown in. I was down to the quays then to see her, and I was surprised. And in many ways, it was emotional to see her back again, to be quite honest, because I suppose being living with boats, you form an attachment to a boat. John, you'll agree with that, You form attachments to boats very quickly, and it was nice to see her coming back. But this really puts it all into perspective. The fact that she's coming back for a purpose, and she can be used for this purpose. And we're hoping that it'll be successful. And if it is, she could be there for a number of years.
I didn't think I'd be doing this again 40 years later.
And 3 books looking at you.
Up to that point in time, we were working with boats here that were very small, very sailing boat literally, and curraghs and rowing. And when I started off with my dad, I was rowing in and out to Runa with my dad in the curragh. And in the little sailing boat, that was the main source of contact with the mainland at that point in time. So it felt to me, of course, as a member of a family of 9, and there was 9 of us in the family. It felt to me to take on the ferry services that my dad took on from his father. That's going back over 150 years ago now. But that's where it all started. And I can't say that I was overjoyed because I was being stuck on Clare Island. All the young lads that went to school along with me, were leaving for the States and for England and for all those places at that point in time, and I was left behind. And of course, my dad saw the potential as far as the ability and the crazy greed for the sea and boats, and he saw it in me, and it was my lot to be here. But then as I said, I started off sailing and curragh work with him in and out to Runa. And as time progressed and I became older, I got a bit weary of all this ancient way of travelling between the mainland and the island. And I said we'd have to do something about it. So then I set to work on getting the motorised transport. And we had a small motorboat, a sailing boat actually, which I put the first engine into at the time. And that was in 1952, and that was the first little motorboat that acted between the island, or sailed between the island and the mainland in my time. So it graduated from that then on to bigger boats, but I saw the need to have a much bigger boat built. And that's where I conceived the whole idea of the Dolphin. She was a big 36-foot boat at the time, and a heavily built boat. And of course, the people in Achill, who were distant relations of my father actually, the O'Malleys, were the boat builders, the local boat builders at the time. And they, I went to them, of course, to do the job, and I had a plan in mind. And I put the plan together with John, the next generation of the boat builders at my time. And we decided we'd go down the road with this heavily built vessel, this Dolphin. And it took about 8 months or 10 months to build her. She was the biggest boat they had built in those days, And when I brought her in here, I remember very well the day I brought her up from Achill to Clare Island, myself and my late wife, who passed away sadly much later. The two of us on board. She was my pride and joy, literally, And the people of the island were amazed, and they came down to look at this big boat. And I remember my dad saying to me, he said, how are you going to hold that big boat in this awful harbour we have here, I said, we'll deal with that when the time comes, So that's how the Dolphin was conceived and brought in.
So whisky has never been matured at sea in Ireland or in Europe before. So this is unique, and it's happening here on Clare Island. Our family's tradition of seamanship has been brought into the project through this vessel, the Dolphin. Which was commissioned in 1968 by my father to operate the ferry to Clare Island. The O'Malleys of Curran, who were related to, built this boat in 1968, and they had built a number of boats before that. The craftsmanship that's involved in building these boats it's remarkable, but it's also dying out. And so there's none of these boats been built in Ireland anymore. So when I saw the boat sunk at the pier in Belmullet, it saddened me, number one, but it gave me a little bit of a pep to get her back because of the family connection to it, and it was nostalgic. And so then when the whole idea of the whiskey came into the fray, I saw the opportunity of blending the two together. And it was at that point then that I bought the boat, brought her back to the island, and then asked the O'Malleys, the original builders, to come to the island to check her out, to see what she was like and see if she was fit to go back to sea. And thankfully they came back and they said yes, and more importantly they said that they would do the work.
For a boat like this, you know, it's something that's probably not going to get built in our workshop again. Unfortunately, the demand's not there. And once the demand isn't there, you're not going to be able to survive, you know, working at that. I mean, shipwrights or boat rights, that's what the trade is. You know, shipwright, that's your title once you build these boats. And unless you're building boats of this size, you know, you can't really consider yourself as a shipwright. It's nice to be involved in this project, you know, and get her back to her former glory, get her out there on the sea again, you know.
And she served with me. Jesus, she brought me through high seas over between Achill, Clare Island and Clare Island and Inishturk, because I used to collect the doctor at times in Achill, who serviced Dr. King, Edward King, who serviced the islands, both islands at the time medically. And they had a clinic once a week on Clare Island, and on call, of course, to Inishturk, and we had many rough days on the high seas to Inishturk on that boat. So she became a big part of my life, and of course she put me on the footing to where we are today, let me put it that way, where we have the boats that we have now, you know, the big 80-ton boats and 90-ton boats, and that was it. So, along with being the main ferry on the island, transporting everything that came into the island, building material, foodstuffs every other day, general merchandise, bringing in coal, bringing in oil, bringing in all that sort of stuff. The requirement of the entire island depended on the boat of that size at that point in time. And she was marvellous. I can only say she was an extraordinary seaboat, and she was a credit to the O'Malleys, of course, the guys that built her, the two brothers that built her, John and Tom, you know. They were, of course, they were the next generation from the man who built all the sailing boats around the bay, but she was the biggest boat in Clube Bay at the time. You know, she had that characteristic and that design, and she was admired by everybody involved in the sea, dealing with the sea at that point in time, you know. So I was very proud of her, to say the least. There was an island community here, I suppose, about 150 or 160 at the time, and more, perhaps more. But it takes quite a bit of transportation to comply with all the requirements. You know, you have everything and anything that comes in here. Like the day was gone when turf, for instance, used to be cut on the island, and people used to provide their own turf for fuel. And they also provided their own potatoes and all the life, everything like that. But that gradually changed completely. And, you know, nobody bothers growing potatoes on Clare Island anymore. So all the potatoes, all the coal, all the food stuff, everything had to be carried. Bottles of gas, oil and all that had to be transported. And it was how she was that was transporting it all for a while I was there. And the hardest part about all that part of my life was the fact that everything had to be lifted on by hand and lifted off by hand. Every concrete block, I remember when I was building the hotel, the first concrete blocks that ever came across through Louisburgh came into Clare Island. They came down from Dublin. There was no concrete blocks being made in west of Dublin. And you know, I had to get blocks down to rebuild the hotel when I built it. And all those blocks had to be handled one at a time onto a boat off the quay in Rona, one at a time off the boat onto the pier in Clare Island, onto some transport to go to the site. So it was, you know, it was all handwork.
Overall, to get the Dolphin from where she was to where she is now has been a monumental effort. First of all, she was refloated. She had to be cleaned and sanded. So there was weeks of work in that. and getting her to this point here. So I suppose what we had to do before the O'Malleys came into it was bring her back to a blank canvas as such, so that they could see where the cracks were and they could see where the work needed to be done. So at that point they came up and they have been working on her since. Now they're working mainly on the hull of the boat, making her watertight, and then we have carpenters doing the internal work, getting her ready for receiving the cask. So yes, I mean, it's been a hell of an effort to get her to where it would have been a lot easier to buy a boat 100-fold, but we wouldn't have had the history and the connection that we have with the Dolphin. People have an emotional attachment to her on the island, and from that reason alone it's great to have her back. And people, I think the community is behind this project, which is great. They're all very, excited about having her back, and about seeing her back at sea, and about the whole idea of the Clare Island whisky matured at sea. So the whole idea behind Clare Island whisky matured at sea is it's to try and create a way of developing full-time sustainable jobs on an island. Islands in general have that problem. There's a lack of sustainable full-time employment, and there's lots of disadvantages to that, and the seasons would be one of the main disadvantages in terms of tourism, because the off-season you can't rely on tourism because it's weather changes and you can't get people in and out. So from that side of it, it's difficult. Plus you don't have the connection to the cities, the towns, so in terms of transportation, so there's other challenges there that prevents creating full-time jobs. So this is trying to turn Clare Island's disadvantage into its advantage. It's trying to come up with a quirky way of creating those jobs. Clare Island whisky matured at sea is using what we have and turning it into a product. It's using our history, it's using our isolation, it's using the ruralness, it's using the sea, and turning that into a marketable product.
The bearer of barrels of whisky was something out of the clouds as far as I was concerned. I had the fairest, it was the last thing that I ever thought of. And then of course, Carl being the Carl, the head that he's on him, he's constantly thinking of something weird every other day.
We're here today in Ballina at the Connacht Distillery to pick up our first instalment of Clare Island whisky matured at sea. The stills that will be producing the whisky were developed by Rob Cashel and designed specifically to enhance the reflux and to add the character which embodies Mayo, the waters and the flavours of Mayo. The whisky will be matured in a ex-bourbon cask from Kentucky. However, to give it, I suppose, the essence and the flavour and the character of Clare Island, we're going to introduce some native bog oak dating back to about 5,000 years ago, which predates Gráinne Ale and all of the the flavours and the character and the history and the folklore of Clare Island, you could say, is captivated within these strains of timber that we're going to add to the very first batch of Clare Island whisky matured at sea.
So really what you've got is the oak wood is made of lignin, and that's the character that makes wood, right? But lignin is just made of sugar. So all we're trying to do is break down some of those sugars to allow the alcohol to react with that sugar. And what I'll do is it'll start to break down some of the wood and it'll release extra flavour. So really, in the case of the bogwood, you'll release some of the peat flavour that's in here, and we'll also get the character of the original oak itself. So really all we've done here is try and allowed the alcohol to access the flavour that we have here. I think the challenge is barrel integrity is going to become a question, you know, as the wood ages, and you know, the sea salt that you're going to be exposed to. You know, there's things like the bands are going to rust extra fast and stuff like that. So, you know, there's a couple of things that could be, and it depends on how violent that motion is. If you hit a storm, you know, how much motion are you going to get? How secure is the barrel going to be, you know? So those are a lot of the technical elements to it. In terms of the flavours and, you know, there's going to be a lot of different things that you're going to see. There's going to be, the constant motion certainly does add a little bit of difference to it, because you'll be giving it more wood flavour, there's more wood contact. Normally if you were rotating barrels even, you would get a little bit of flavour, but the constant motion means that you're constantly getting that wood contact.
Today we're standing in the Clare Island Abbey, 12th century abbey, and which has become a huge part of our brand, Clare Island Whisky. We stand under a ceiling with incredible paintings from that period, and one of them specifically is a body-sharing beast. And we have taken that symbol and it has become the iconic image of Clare Island whisky and we're hugely excited about bringing this to the larger public and see a huge role for the Abbey in the future. 12th century Cistercian Abbey would have been around for the time of the O'Malleys. The O'Malley stronghold. Grace O'Malley herself is supposedly buried right here beside me in underneath that tombstone, and of course this is her crest of arms, the O'Malley crest of arms. So massive historical significance, and all here for the public and visitors to come and experience. When I was a child, there was no roof on the old part, and it was all open, and there was the stairways here leads you up to the nave above the ceiling where the monks used to live, and we used to play around here as kids before it was, I suppose, became into prominence and became so well known, and of course renovated and restored to its amazing self, where people can come in and really just take in the exquisite work of 800 years ago. I think the Clare Island whisky experience is very much different for everybody. I think it gives a platform or a place where people can go and experience the uniqueness of islands, the special nature of islands, the special history, culture, adventure, all of those things that's there. But it's not just those things. It gives you those things in a place where there's no other distractions, and where you have a place that you can reflect and that you're kind of disconnected from the world. And that's really what the experience is about. It really is about your personal island experience and what makes it special for you. Everybody that comes to partake in the Clare Island experience, they're very much so become part of our story. I mean, you leave with a piece of Clare Island, literally, in Clare Island single malt. But the actual spirit itself, the single malt, is a reminder. It's not the be-all and end-all. I mean, the spirit literally is a reminder of Clare Island's gift, which is, your time for reflection, and every time you crack open that bad boy in the future, you'll remember that. The boat looks fabulous. You'll see it now in a few minutes. She looks amazing. Her lines, she's just the most beautiful boat that you can imagine, and so perfect for what we're doing. It couldn't be more perfect. You don't know how things are going to go. You don't know the next step. You don't know if you're taking the right step, if you're going left, if you're going right, if you're doing it wrong. I mean, who knows? This whole thing, who knows? So it's a big gamble. But I'm excited. Today is the day. Everybody's turned out to see how it goes. So fingers crossed, it'll be successful. The boat is anchored off Canacurra, a point off the island here. We're going to head out there in a while and tow the boat into the harbour. She's going to get an escort with her. One of the big ferries that took her place many years later, the Clew Bay Queen, twice her size, 3 times her size, and it just shows the contrast, between the service back then and the service today. So it's very exciting, and she'll be brought in onto the pier, and then we're going to lift the cask on her. We're going to relaunch her, the Dolphin Clare Island whisky matured at sea.
I thought the man was crazy, I'm not going to lie. I didn't think that he would actually go ahead and do it. I thought once he was saying it, I thought he was messing, but he did it. It's Carl. Yeah, I don't know. He's done a great job so far, and I'm sure it'll be great. So fair play to him.
My other brother Brian and I, we were thinking of, putting an engine on it and using it to go fishing in the evenings, and maybe island hop, and just to pass the time with their own children, and sort of let them have the feel of what it was like in an old timber boat, and the smells and the rolling and so on and so forth. And Carl then came, he said, no, we'll just put whiskey into it. And we thought he'd lost his mind, we thought it was crazy.
For me, you know, for the future, I can always say, well, look at, you know, there's the Dolphin. You know, she's doing well again, and I was involved in getting her back to that, you know. So I think personally, at this point, you know, after spending a bit of time working on her and that, I think it'll be nice to see it all working out, yeah.
Everybody thought I was a bit nuts doing what I did. Yeah, I mean, of course, I think I probably am a bit nuts, but sure, c'est la vie, you have to live on the edge. I think, yeah, it's been a crazy experience, to be honest. From all the hours, the months, the weeks of work put into restoring the Dolphin, those cold, miserable days, and bringing her back to life so that she was seaworthy again. You know, the whole idea of bringing a whiskey on a boat in the wild Atlantic when you're dealing with storms and you're dealing with crazy weather, heavy swells, meters and meters of swells, people would just think you're nuts. But when you grow up with that stuff and you're born with it, you're used to it. And the idea of keeping a boat on the strand on Clare Island for 4 years with stuff with whiskey in its belly, to me, just didn't stress me too much. So yeah, it's a bit crazy, but I think for me, if people can come to the island and experience what we have done, I think they will see something spectacular. I think they will see something of themselves, because there's something here for everybody. Weeks and months and years renovating the boat, not knowing exactly where we were going, you know, lost at sea a lot of the time, trying to find our way, and meeting people along the way, helping me on the next step, bringing me here, bringing me there, and it's just been a crazy journey, crazy, and we still don't know if it's going to work. We still don't know anything, except that we're just being true to who we are, and true to the island, and true to the people and the boat, and giving people what we believe the island is all about. So, you know, it's been crazy. So we're very looking forward to it massively. You know, people hopefully will see the benefit and the work and the love and the energy that's gone into it, and enjoy it, most importantly, and come back again.
Too strong, that's wrong. Oh, she's really good stuff. Don't lose it on the board. I'm Chris. No. Here. Come back. Keep it on the steel up here.